Why didn't I like her when I first met her? She wasn't the woman I dreamed of for my son. She wasn't from a rich family, she didn't have a college degree, and she was just Brazilian. I was sure she married him for money and documents. To me, she would never be good enough. I humiliated her, I treated her like a maid. But when tragedy struck, I never imagined she would be the one taking care of me. Lydia leaned her forehead against the car window and saw the houses lined up, perfectly. The sky was an almost offensive blue, cloudless, with no hiding places. She took a deep breath, remembering her mother in Brazil saying, "Courage, daughter." Beside her, her husband, Ethan, smiled nervously, gripping the steering wheel. His mother's mansion loomed like a verdict, white and silent. The door opened before they even parked, as if they were late. Margaret, the mother-in-law, measured Lydia up and down, cold and methodical. "Welcome," he said, without warmth, and turned into the house. Lydia replied thank you in a whisper, clutching her bag tightly. Ethan tried to break the ice. The ice didn't break, it just creaked. Inside, everything was big, polished, and too organized to have room for flaws. Thick carpets swallowed footsteps, old paintings stared judgmentally. Lydia smiled at a childhood photo of Ethan, a beautiful family. He commented, "To be part of something." "What's left of her?" Margaret retorted, without looking back. The first requirement came with hospitality. "Leave your bags in the guest room. Dinner is at 6. "Guest room?" Lydia repeated, surprised by the word. Margaret raised her eyebrow, as if correcting an insolence. "Until things are clear, dear." The word heard in the diminutive, Lydia tried to convince herself that it was just a rough start. Perhaps Ethan's father's grief still shadowed the house. Perhaps her accent sounded defiant to defensive ears. Maybe it was just his imagination, that smell of judgment in the air. But the clock in the room was ticking away seconds of disapproval. Ethan hugged her from the side, quickly, like a runner's hug. He promised that his mother would soon understand, that everything would pass. "She's complicated, but she's not bad," he said, faltering at the end. Lydia nodded, keeping the sentence as if she were keeping a receipt. "Even before dinner, it felt like I owed something." In the kitchen, the steel gleamed like a doctor's office. Margaret opened drawers and instructed with an imperious finger. "Plates here, cutlery here, glasses without marks, without stains." "Of course," Lydia said, in correct English that was not credible. "We'll see," replied the mother-in-law, as if administering a surprise test. When the clock struck 6, the table was perfect. Lydia arranged flowers that no one asked for, out of kindness. "Overdone," Margaret snapped, shifting the arrangement mercilessly. Ethan cleared his throat, failing to play bridge. Lydia smiled anyway, because she learned to smile in the storm. During dinner, the first venomous question came. "And your study plans? Do they actually exist, or are they plans?" Lydia talked about the courses, the equivalency, and her old dreams. Margaret pushed her plate away, impeccable in her restrained disdain. "We'll see after you contribute to the house." The word contribute fell with the sound of a chain. Lydia looked at Ethan, asking for emotional translation. He turned away, caught between affection and ancient obedience. Margaret concluded, "Everyone under this roof has a role." The ceiling seemed lower, heavier, with no possible sky. At night, in the guest room, Lydia tidied up her clothes. He folded hopes along with t-shirts, trying to breathe. The suitcase smelled of the sea, the airport, and farewell. She wrote a message to her mother. "I arrived safely." He deleted the part that said, "But I'm not whole." He slept little, in an alert position, his soul awake. He heard footsteps, a clock, ice in someone's glass. At dawn, he decided to be kind before being hurt. Got up early, made coffee, learned how to use buttons and the kettle. When Margaret entered, The aroma turned suspicious in the air. Strong coffee? He asked, as if accusing someone of a crime. Brazil, replied Lydia, with a hint of pride. We're not in Brazil, came dryly, like bad news. Ethan arrived later, complimented the smell, tried bridges. Margaret served herself, as if signing the sentence. The tasks arrived as implicit messages in the footer. If you could wash the crystal glasses, I would appreciate it. Said Margaret, if you can prepare brunch, your guests will appreciate it. If you could organize the pantry, it's a mess for me. Always if you can, when could meant must. Lydia calculated routines between learning and pleasing. He opened the college website and filled out forms. Hearing footsteps, he reflexively minimized the window. Guilt came before reason, trained by the house. He sighed, promising not to abandon himself any time soon. At the supermarket, Margaret spoke like the world's manager. Choose the cheapest, just don't skimp on what's mine. Avoid strong seasonings, we are not in a bar. Lydia chose rice, beans, Sunday memories, exotic exaggerations. The mother-in-law declared, without proving anything. Lydia's English was clean, but it wasn't enough. Margaret repeated slowly, as if to a child, got it? And the honey at the end, cutting. Ethan smiled wryly, his tongue between two homelands. Lydia responded, I understand, and even understood the contempt. One afternoon, Lydia put on some low music, an old boss, 2 windows open to the sun. Margaret came in and hung up with a theatrical touch. The house needs silence to think. I can think while listening to music, Lydia said softly. The next silence was a narrow corridor. Margaret crossed her arms, weighing each syllable. You are here because of my son. Not in spite of him. And because of my goodwill too. Goodwill seemed like a contract to be fulfilled. At Sunday dinner, family friends came, glasses clinked, conversations about stocks and travels. Margaret introduced Lydia as the newcomer. I didn't say, my daughter-in-law. I didn't say, Ethan's wife. The title was left hanging, like a removed chair. A guest asked about Brazil sweetly. Lydia talked about the sea, coconut ice cream, her grandmother. Margaret cut in, beautiful stories. And documents, right? The table fell silent like a falling audience. Lydia smiled, an old exercise against new tears. When he collected the dishes, he heard suppressed laughter. In the kitchen, the hot water felt like a bath of dignity. Ethan came in, touched her shoulder, said sorry. Not for me, Lydia pleaded, for us. He was silent, because the we required courage. At night, in her room, Lydia opened the browser, searched for daughter-in-law rights, microaggressions, evidence. He saw a recorder in the shopping cart and hesitated. It's not war, he thought, it's survival with witnesses. Bought the device, a yes for herself. The next day, the routine became a sound script. The click of Margaret's tongue, the sigh of disapproval. Green card is not a passport to time off, he heard in the distance. Lydia kept the phrase as if she were filing away an insult. It would be the trail of the rewriting itself. She tested small, almost invisible limits. He read for half an hour before lunch and did some stretching. He prepared a Brazilian dish and served it with care. Margaret tasted it, arched her eyebrow, and said, edible. Lydia laughed inside. Joy fit in the diminutive. In the late afternoon, she set the table with simple flowers. He wrote on a piece of paper, today we survived a little longer. He folded the paper and put it among the dictionary notes. He thought of his mother, his country, his body insisting on belonging, and he decided, quietly, I'm not going to disappear here. When he lay down, he heard the house breathing through the ceiling. Each piece of wood seemed to remind him that it wasn't his, and yet the heart took root in the chest. Ethan slept restlessly, half son, half husband. Lydia turned to the side and wished for courage. On Monday, the list appeared stuck to the refrigerator. Items in order, times and observations in red, clean bathrooms, iron clothes, organized the garage. Lydia took a deep breath, counted to 8, and smiled briefly. Functions under this roof, echoed the cutting mantra. Ethan suggested splitting, but the sentence died shyly. I have meetings, he said, choosing the less harsh side. Lydia organized buckets like someone organizing their chest. She put on gloves, tied her hair back, and turned on the recorder. If I couldn't change the day, I would record the world. In the bathroom, the mop became a war brush. Each tile wrote "You exist." Continue. The foam hid tears that didn't want to be seen on stage. Lydia marked short pauses, water, present breathing, survived the first round of an invisible journey. At the laundry, Margaret would drop in for inspections. Be careful with the silk, it's not fair clothes. Yes, ma'am, Lydia replied, hurting herself with the ma'am. In his pocket, the recorder held the sharp words. It was a real charm against convenient versions. At noon, Lydia tried to study discreetly, opened a PDF, set a timer for 20 minutes. Break of routine, Margaret declared from her workstation. Lunch first, then the rest you promised. He promised, no, they imposed, he thought, and swallowed hard. The pantry became the stage for exemplary organization. Labels turned, cans by height, watchful perfection. It's always been like this in my house, Margaret warned. Lydia aligned everything, aligned her anger, aligned her voice. It won't always be like this in my life, he promised himself. When the phone rang, Lydia gathered her courage. It was the mother, with the sea coming in through the connection. Is everything okay, daughter? I'm working, Mom. The word working heard in its own irony, working to exist under a priced roof. In the late afternoon, Lydia cooked rice and beans. The smell opened windows that the house insisted on closing. Margaret tasted it, arranged her cutlery as if to sentence, edible, but heavy. Tomorrow, salad. Lydia smiled. The body thanked her before the verdict. At night, he reviewed the list, crossing it off like a soldier. Each risk was less about tasks, more about limits. He put away the recorder and felt a tiredness that didn't fit. Ethan tried to massage the guilt away gently. I'm trying, he said. Me too, she replied. Before going to sleep, Lydia wrote 3 lines on a piece of paper. I am not the role they gave me. I am the woman who will give myself. Tomorrow I'll buy myself flowers. He folded the paper like someone folding a possible map. The announcement came in the morning. Guests at 7. Margaret handed out orders like inverted invitations. Light menu, no extravagant seasonings. Lydia nodded, hands steady, heart on guard. The recorder has a new, discreet place on the apron. She cut vegetables in bossa nova rhythms, seasoned with lemon, garlic, patience, and memory. She arranged the table with simple and elegant flowers. Each folded napkin said respect is my due. The clock responded with ticks of expectation. When they arrived, the air became crystal clear. Polite laughter, questions about business and wine. Margaret introduced Lydia as the newcomer. I didn't say daughter-in-law, nor wife, nor family. A void filled the missing chair. A lady asked about Brazil. Kindly, Lydia talked about beaches. Fairs, cashews. Ethan smiled, proud for a rare moment. Margaret tilted her glass, punctuating the silence. And the documents. Were they a beach too? Someone's short laugh hit the porcelain. Lydia felt her face heat up and her spine firm. He took a breath, thought of his mother, of the language she carries. He replied, my most important document is respect. And he served salad as if serving a shield. Margaret leaned back, savoring the power of the room. I just hope my son's investment pays off. The word investment hit like a cold stone. Ethan looked down, his fork aimless. The recorder, silent, stored each syllable. In the kitchen, Lydia washed dishes with trembling hands. The steam rose, becoming a cloud between her and the world. Are you okay? The kind guest whispered, I'm learning to stay, he replied half-truthfully. He saved dishes. He saved dignity. He saved a decision. Back at the table, the toast was family united. Lydia's cup touched glass carefully and ironically. United around what word? He thought silently. When he collected the plates, he heard green card again, each letter added to the soul's dossier. In the end, Margaret thanked Lydia for her help. Lukewarm applause, praise for the hard-working girl. Ethan tried to correct her, but he lost his breath. Lydia just smiled with the corner she still had. She kept the rest of her smile to herself. In the room, he closed the door carefully like glass. He heard footsteps in the hallway, a glass, a sigh. He turned on the recorder and heard fragments of the dinner. Each sentence was a nail that held evidence. It's not war, he murmured, it's documented survival. Before going to bed, he wrote another short message. Today they called me out of interest. Tomorrow I will call myself the future. I'll buy the better recorder if I need it, and I don't get lost for anything. The guest room smelled of soap and longing. Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, hands cold, eyes hot. The guest's suppressed laughter still echoed in his mind. He opened his cell phone and almost called his mother in Brazil. He closed it again, saving her from transatlantic tears. The mirror returned a tired but firm face. I'm not invisible, he muttered in Portuguese. He took the recorder and listened to the night speeches. Each word Margaret said came like a sheathed blade. This will come in handy one day, he promised his reflection. The next day, the coffee came without emotional sugar. Margaret entered the kitchen and watched her silently. Learn, a good marriage is measured in contributions. I contribute with love, Lydia replied calmly. Love doesn't pay the bills, the mother-in-law replied coldly. Ethan noticed the heavy mood, but dodged it. I have to leave early, I'll be back late, he said hurriedly. Lydia smiled without teeth, only with resistance. He kept the sentence as if it were more proof. It was difficult to tell who shared the pillow. In the laundry room, he folded clothes like someone folding sorrows. Each shirt felt heavier than the fabric. The hidden recorder captured the imperative tone. You have no future without this house, said Margaret. Lydia took a deep breath and simply replied, we'll see. In the afternoon, he sat on the porch with a notebook. He wrote in English, with careful handwriting, my future is not here, my future is mine. The wind took the phrase, but not the decision. He kept the notebook like someone keeping a passport. When Ethan returned, he tried to comfort her with kisses. She just needs time, trust me. I don't have all the time in the world, said Lydia. He looked away, hurt by his own omission. The couple's silence was crueler than words. Before going to sleep, Lydia cried in silence. They weren't tears of surrender, but of contained fury. The wet pillow held silent promises. She knew she needed to hold out a little longer. Tomorrow, he planned, he would start taking real action. Ethan woke up with the expression of someone who had dreamed of burdens. He looked at Lydia, who was already getting dressed in silence. You're distant, he said, trying to make conversation. Away from those who don't defend me, he replied firmly. The sentence hung in the air, louder than a scream. By breakfast, Margaret had her criticisms ready. Too many eggs, not enough doneness, coffee too strong. Lydia listened, smiled, and saved it to the recorder. Ethan choked on his bread, unable to respond. The weight of the table seemed to fall on him as well. In the car on the way to work, Ethan called, Honey, you need to understand. She's complicated. Complicated is not synonymous with cruel. Lydia retorted. On the other side, silence from those who don't want to choose. The call ended with a weak I love you. At night, the couple argued in the stuffy bedroom. Do you want me to fight with my mother? I want you to treat me like a wife, not a maid. Ethan lowered his head, ashamed of his own cowardice. Lydia cried, standing up, not allowing anyone to see her break down. The next day, Margaret tested another limit: those college papers. I threw them away, they were out of place. Lydia felt her stomach churn, but she remained firm. Don't worry, I already have digital copies. The calm response irritated more than a shout. Ethan arrived late, tired, but he noticed the mood. Why do you do this to her, Mom? He ventured. Because I want to save you from a costly mistake, he replied. Lydia listened from the door, recorder active in her pocket. Ethan didn't know what to say, a prisoner of two worlds. In the bedroom, Lydia looked at her husband firmly. I won't give up myself for you. He tried to hug her, but she drew back, cold. Prove that I am your wife, not your employee. Ethan had no proof, just silence. Margaret, on the other side of the door, smiled contentedly. The muffled sound of the argument fed his control. For her, it was enough to divide and conquer. For Lydia, it was another chapter in the dossier, and the recorder slept full of hidden truths. On the bed, Ethan turned over, defeated. Lydia turned to the wall, determined. The tears came, but they were liquid steel. In her heart, she was already planning her next steps. The silent war was just beginning. At the local library, Lydia filled out the form. It was a night nursing course, a chance for the future. He held the pen as if holding hope. The attendant smiled, wishing him good luck. She smiled back, already seeing herself in the room. On the way home, I hid the papers in my bag. He walked firmly, as if he were guarding gold. His heart was beating fast with excitement. Nothing can hold me back now, he murmured softly, but Margaret already had other plans on the table. In the kitchen, the mother-in-law rummaged through her purse. He found the papers and read them with contempt. Course? Who's going to pay the bills here? Lydia snatched it from his hands, firmly. I don't need permission to dream. Margaret laughed like someone chopping dry wood. Dreaming doesn't wash the dishes or make the bed. Ethan walked in and froze at the scene. Explained to her that this is not a hotel. Lydia took a deep breath and swallowed her anger. By nightfall, the papers had mysteriously disappeared. The bag was empty, drawers rummaged through. The course seemed to evaporate into thin air. But Lydia had scanned every page. On the cell phone, the future still pulsed. Alone in her room, she wrote once more. They can hide my papers, but they cannot hide my will. One day I will be out of this house, and no one will be able to stop it. Era Sabado, e casa carava a Parlamento, Margaret exigia escadas limpa e corameos brilhando, Lydia subiu com balde pano humido, faca diarito, brasileira, ironizou a sogra, Ethan saiu apressado, fugindo de tempestade, palco depois, ouviu-se grito agudo, Margaret escorregu no piso mojado, o impacto equa como vidro partindo. Lydia correu e encontrou a sogra queda, o rosto dela estava pálido, a perna torta, Naomi toque. Grita Margaret entre doors, mas as lágrimas desmentiam a bravura. Lydia pegou o telefone, chama emergência, minha sogra caiu, precisa de ajuda. A voz dela tremia, mas era firme. No hospital, o diagnóstico foi direito. Fratura grave, semanas de recuperação. Margaret gritava com enfermeiros impacientes. Neo preciso de ajuda, sou de competência. Mas os alhos denunciavam medo profundo. De volta à casa, a adaptaco cômico, cadeira de rodas, remedios, banhos assistidos, uma enfermeira contratada chegou para ajudar, mas a impaciência era visível em cada gesto. Margaret corava sozinha no quarto escuro. Lydia observava de longe, coração dividido, lembrava das ofensas, das humilhações. Mas também via a dor real da sogra. Naquela noite, tomou uma decisão inesperada. se ningum tem patientia, eu terii. Ethan ficu surpriso calma escaladella, depois de tudo o que ela fez? Ajustament por isso, responde calma, eu neo vumi tornar como ela. E abraco sua nova missão silenciosa, na primeira madrugada, Margaret grita de dor, a enfermeira demora, resmungando irritada, Lydia levantou-se e correu ao quarto, ajudou a ajeitar a perna, cantarola baixo, a sogra a algo como quem via estranho, o silencio dura minutos, passado e revelador, Margaret, pela primeira vez, neo falou nada. Apenas coro silencio nos bracos de Nora, e Lydia entende que algo comunicava a mudar, neo por perdeo, mas por humanidade. It was Saturday, and the house smelled of polish. Margaret demanded clean stairs and shining handrails. Lydia went upstairs with a bucket and a damp cloth. Do it right, Brazilian, the mother-in-law said ironically. Ethan hurried away, fleeing the storm. Shortly after, a high-pitched scream was heard. Margaret slipped on the wet floor. The impact echoed like shattering glass. Lydia ran and found her mother-in-law fallen. Her face was pale. Her leg was crooked. Don't touch me. Margaret screamed in pain, but the tears belied the bravery. Lydia picked up the phone and called emergency services. My mother-in-law fell. She needs help. Her voice was shaking, but it was firm. At the hospital, the diagnosis was straightforward: serious fracture, weeks of recovery. Margaret yelled at impatient nurses, I don't need help, just competence. But the eyes betrayed deep fear. Back home, the adaptation began: wheelchair, medicine, assisted baths. A hired nurse arrived to help, but impatience was visible in every gesture. Margaret cried alone in the dark room. Lydia watched from afar, her heart divided. I remembered the insults, the humiliations, but he also saw his mother-in-law's real pain. That night, he made an unexpected decision. If no one has patience, I will. Ethan was surprised by her choice. After everything she did? That's exactly why. He replied calmly, I will not become like her. And he embraced his new silent mission. In the early morning, Margaret screamed in pain. The nurse took her time, muttering irritably. Lydia got up and ran to her room. He helped to adjust the leg, humming softly. The mother-in-law looked at her as if she saw a stranger. The silence lasted for minutes, heavy and revealing. Margaret, for the first time, said nothing. She just cried silently in her daughter-in-law's arms. And Lydia understood that something was starting to change, not for forgiveness, but for humanity. Lydia woke up before sunrise. He prepared medicine, warm tea, clean sheets. Every gesture was discipline and compassion. Margaret watched in vulnerable silence. The daughter-in-law transformed into an unlikely angel. Baths became moments of trust. Lydia spoke in Portuguese, quietly. He sang excerpts from childhood songs. Margaret closed her eyes, breathing slowly. He let himself be guided by the voice that once wounded him. In the corridors, the sound of the chair echoed. Lydia pushed slowly, narrating the landscape. Look at the sun coming in through the window. Margaret gave a shy smile, small, but true. Ethan, upon arriving, saw the scene, mother and wife side by side. In rare peace, his heart beat with relief. Thank you, Lydia murmured softly. She just nodded. Without asking for anything, meals became ceremonies of care. Hot soups, carefully cut fruits. Margaret no longer refused. She accepted in silence. Each spoonful felt like a slow surrender. Respect blossomed in silence. Discreetly, at night, conversations gained space. Margaret spoke of youth, old parties. Lydia listened patiently. Without judgment, memories created invisible bridges. Two women who were once distant, now close. In a moment of pain, Margaret cried, Why do you do this, after all? Lydia held his hand firmly, because my essence does not depend on hate. The tears mingled in silence. Ethan watched from afar, thrilled. I had never seen so much strength in Lydia, not so much vulnerability in the mother. The house changed its atmosphere. Discreet love filled the air. That night, Margaret slept peacefully. No screaming, no fear, just peace. Lydia closed the door slowly. In his chest, a weight had transformed, not in spite, but in freedom. The dawn was silent, the cold wind blew. Margaret woke up with sharp pain in her leg. Lydia ran to the room, already accustomed to the call. He adjusted the pillows and massaged carefully. The mother-in-law's face was pale, marked by fatigue. In the dark, the question arose unexpectedly. "Why do you do this for me?" Margaret's voice trembled like fragile glass. "After everything I told you, after everything." The silence weighed more than the pain itself. Lydia took a deep breath, caressing her hand. Memories of humiliation came like tides. But in the chest there was a new, clean space. "Because I don't want to be like you were with me." The words echoed softly, but sharply. Margaret swallowed hard, tears welling up. I was wrong." The confession came out broken. It was the first time that pride had lowered. Lydia did not respond immediately. He just held that fragile hand tightly. The clock on the wall ticked away in eternal minutes. Ethan peered through the half-open door, excited. He had never seen his mother so vulnerable, so human, not even the wife so strong, so upright. The contrast struck him as a revelation. "You might hate me," said Margaret. "Maybe I should have. I deserved it." Lydia sighed, her eyes fixed on hers. "I don't do it because I deserve it, I do it for myself. My heart has no room for resentment." The silence turned into a fragile bridge. For a moment, two women met, not as mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but as people, wounds, different, but connected by pain, and for choosing not to perpetuate hate. The dawn ended in rare stillness. Margaret fell asleep with her hand in Lydia's. Ethan came in and covered them with a soft blanket. He whispered, "You are more than I deserve." Lydia just closed her eyes, in peace. The sun rose, gilding the silent room. Margaret, in a chair, watched the garden. The flowers swayed freely. Without asking permission, Lydia brought tea, serving it delicately. The scene seemed to come out of a distant dream. "You should hate me," Margaret repeated, now with a calmer, almost resigned voice. "And yet, you're here taking care of me." Lydia smiled slightly, sitting down next to him. "I am not a hostage to what you feel for me." The answer fell like an unbreakable truth. Margaret stared at the floor, without arguments. Shame consumed her more than pain. Lydia took a deep breath and added, "Respect is not asked for, it is earned." At that moment, Ethan entered the room. He saw his wife standing tall in dignity. He saw his mother diminished in guilt, and he realized where true greatness lay. "I admire you, Lydia," he said sincerely. Margaret tried to justify herself, confused. "I just wanted to protect my son." "Protection doesn't humiliate," Lydia said firmly. "True love never needs to diminish another." The words were accurate arrows. For a moment, silence took over. The clock marked the weight of the moment. Margaret cried softly, vulnerable. Lydia stood tall, serene. Ethan just watched, learning silently. That afternoon, Lydia opened the window. The wind came in, sweeping away the heavy air. It was as if the house was breathing again. Within her, a certainty blossomed. His dignity would never be negotiated. In the diary, he wrote in firm letters, "I don't care about being accepted. I care because my essence is greater. Today I chose to be light, not shadow, and no one can take that away." The afternoon was gray when Lydia decided to act. He took the box of recordings hidden in the closet. Each file was a wound kept in silence, each of Margaret's voices, a testimony of humiliation. It was time to turn pain into justice. Ethan walked in and found her listening to the audios. You recorded all of this? He asked, surprised. Lydia nodded, without lowering her eyes. Not for revenge, but to keep from going mad. He listened and, for the first time, was shocked. Mother's words cut like knives. She just wants the documents. Lazy Brazilian. Ethan covered his face with his hands, embarrassed. Oh my God, I let this happen. Guilt weighed like lead on his chest. In the evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. A cousin of the family, a discreet lawyer. Lydia cautiously showed the recordings. This is documented psychological abuse, he said. You have every right to protect yourself. Margaret, in the room, heard part of the conversation. Her face flushed with embarrassment. He tried to defend himself. They were just words. But the words already had the weight of history, and now it was irrefutable proof. Ethan confronted his mother, his eyes welling up. I thought you were strong, but you were cruel. Margaret cried, trying to explain, without success. The truth was there, recorded and raw. There was no way to erase the past. Lydia didn't shout. She didn't get excited. He just said, now everyone knows. Margaret felt the blow of dignity. For the first time, the Brazilian was not invisible. It was the clearest voice in the house. That night, Lydia slept in rare peace. The weight of silence no longer crushed her. Now he had proof, respect and strength. The humiliation game was over, and the truth shone like a beacon. The email arrived in the morning, discreetly. Congratulations, you have been selected for the scholarship. Lydia read it 3 times, her heart racing. Tears fell, but they were tears of victory. The future was finally within reach. He ran to the balcony with his cell phone. The wind ruffled her hair, light as ever. I did it, she muttered to herself. The sun seemed to shine only for her. It was the reward for his resistance. Ethan read the message, moved. You deserve it, more than anyone. Lydia smiled, but she wasn't looking for approval. She knew the value of conquest. It was the fruit of his own strength. Margaret watched silently from her chair. Pride was mixed with shame. Are you going to study? Even after everything? Lydia nodded calmly. My future does not depend on your past. The evening course started the following week. Lydia packed her backpack enthusiastically. Books, notebooks, hope between the pages. Margaret watched her, silent. A shy smile escaped, almost imperceptible. In the first class, Lydia shone. He asked questions and took notes with discipline. She felt alive, in control of her own path. Every word the teacher said was fuel. It was like being reborn in another language. At home, the atmosphere was slowly changing. Ethan supported. Margaret was silent. The tension no longer held her back. Now there was a new pillar in life. Independence was irreversible. In her diary, Lydia wrote happily, I am no longer a maid in my own house. I am a student. I am a free woman. The scholarship is not just study, it is liberation. Today, finally, I breathe like myself. The morning was bright when Lydia closed her suitcase. Books, simple clothes, and courage folded between fabrics. Ethan helped her, silent complicity in his gestures. Margaret watched from her chair, her face etched with regret. The house seemed smaller after that farewell. Are you really going? Margaret asked, her voice frail. I will, because now it is my turn to live. Lydia spoke calmly, without rancor, only truth. I wish you find peace too. The mother-in-law's tears flowed silently. At the door, Ethan held her hand. I love you, and I will always be with you. Lydia smiled and kissed him on the forehead. Just love me truly, without silence. He nodded, finally learning what support meant. The suitcase slid slowly into the car. Each step was light, but full of history. The wind touched his face in welcome. She looked back one last time. That house was no longer his prison. Margaret, alone in the room, reflected in pain. He remembered every cruel word, every cold gesture, and he saw in his daughter-in-law what he never managed to be: strong, dignified, free from invisible chains. The repentance was late, but true. On the car seat, Lydia opened the diary. He wrote, "Today I begin the life that was denied to me." He closed the pages firmly, his eyes welling up. They were not tears of weakness, but of liberation. The future awaited her without chains. At university, the doors opened wide. Students laughed, books in their hands, horizons ahead. Lydia took a deep breath, entering that new world. There, she was just another student, and that was enough to make her feel fulfilled. At night, alone in the student room, she reflected. He thought of Margaret, of the pain and the care. He thought about the hatred he could have chosen, and in the love he decided to offer, the choice that truly set her free. With the pen, he wrote the last question: "Would you take care of your mother-in-law after being humiliated?" He closed the diary and smiled into the void. The answer was up to each heart that listened, but yours was already written on your soul. The moonlight entered through the window. Serene, Lydia lay down, embraced by new dreams. She was no longer a maid, she was a protagonist. From Brazil to his new home, he achieved dignity, and she slept free, finally her own woman.